Hello and welcome. What we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at how you plan your essay response. Now, for those of you who say, oh, I don't need to plan, and I know I've come across enough of you, then basically let me put it this way. You need a plan. Now, once you've interpreted the question, you need your plan. And the reason why is it helps you develop your ideas in advance. It makes you execute your writing perfectly when you're writing an essay. Now, even if it's something that you only do over 5 minutes, and really a good plan and someone who's used to planning will only take a couple of minutes to do so. And it will enable you to structure your argument and making it both logical and cohesive. So basically what that means is by making an argument both logical and cohesive, what you're doing is you're setting it up so you're starting with your strongest point and you're working your way down. You're doing it so that everything blends together, that you're writing in such a way where you don't have to keep crossing out things because you're not happy with your idea, because you already would have planned it in advance. And actually what you're doing by planning is you're saving time. You're saving time with mistakes. You're saving time with being unsure what it is you're writing next. You're saving time by being able to plan and coordinate your essay response, and that you cover every aspect in the question in the given time that you have if you're doing an exam, or making sure that you can do it within the given word limit without having to cross things out, or if you're one of those people who finish early, being able to write it and expand upon it in different ways that you bring it up to the word limit required. Of course, you'd be trying to write over the word limit and then cut it down, and I'm hoping you're one of those students. So by planning and by really thinking about it, what you're doing is you know exactly what it is you need to do. You don't overplan it. You don't try and write specifically what you're going to say in every section, but have an idea that's flexible enough that you can keep working on it. And then if you've got an idea that you want to change slightly as you go down, you go back to your plan, you make sure that it will fit, and then you put it in. So you make it flexible, but at the same time, you know exactly where it is that you're going next. It's a roadmap. That's all it is. And it really, as I said, should only take you a few seconds just to really identify first, and then a couple of minutes to really develop into enough detail that you're ready to go and you exactly know what you need to do. Okay, so let's put the question and the planning first. So what you're doing is you must address each aspect of the question. Now, it might seem obvious when you do this, but it's something that really does require diligence. So making sure that when you looked at the question, identified the keywords and every other little part of the question, you know exactly what it is that you need to do. Your plan is making sure you address every one of those keywords and really putting an answer which is going to then relate back to the question. And you're basically indicating that what you're writing is going to answer the question. Now, if you've got a couple of keywords in mind, and this is always very helpful, by having lots of keywords in mind, you're basically repeating to yourself over and over, okay, I need to do this and I need to do this in my answer. And as you're planning it, you've got that frame of mind already. So you're not forgetting halfway through what it is you're actually writing about again. And often, if you're doing an exam, for instance, and I know I've done them as well, the adrenaline kicks in and you're just writing things and you completely forget what it is the question was again. So by planning it in advance, and if you're sticking to that plan, then what you're doing is you're basically making sure that everything you're writing is related back to the question, and that you're thinking about it in such a way that you know where you're going next. You know exactly what it is you're trying to do. And it helps to sort of calm you. It really does give you an idea of exactly what it is you need to do. Okay, so the planning process. Take some time, and do really take time. Consider all potential answers and evaluate which one's the best one. So all those lots of ideas you have, try and condense them into a couple of main ones. So like this diagram showing here, is you've got tons of ideas, they all swirling around like a big pool, and then you just try and group them together. So you group them. This avoids repetition and it helps to strengthen them. So if you've got a couple of really big main ideas, and then you really develop them for your discussion and you link them back to the question again, then what you're doing is you're really developing your argument with a great deal of strength. And that's again what you're trying to do, rather than having lots of little things swimming around which you're then trying to prove and justify, and it becomes a big mess. Next thing is you develop 3 or 4 of them. So I would prefer 3 personally if I'm looking at someone's response. And really just sort of group them, you have them ready to go. And then from there you can basically find key pieces of evidence which you can use in your answer, which basically back up those things. So you can find them in advance. Of course, you can do it as you're writing as well, but it's always good to know roughly where you're going to get your ideas from and how it is you're going to prove it. So this is something that you also need to do. And finally, you're arranging your main ideas. So after you've got them, you've grouped them, you've developed them, you know exactly what you're going to write for each section, you found evidence, you arrange them. So you put them in order from strongest to weakest. Now, that's not to say your bottom argument is so weak that it barely holds water. What you're saying is that you start with your strongest idea and then you just work your way down. All the ideas should be roughly about the same in strength, but you would still start with your strongest one. Okay, next bit. So your main points. Now, having main points which are strong and clear will give your argument and your answer cohesion. So basically, you're making a strong link between your question, your answer, and your definition. So all those 3 things are linked together. So your question would be obviously the question that's being asked. The answer is how you've interpreted it. And your definition is a word or a phrase that you're using to support your definition, which will be outlined in your introduction and will be outlined at different points in your body, in your discussion of your essay. By combining keywords of the question with your definition, you're ensuring that your argument matches the aim of the question, as I said before. And your main points will indicate the purpose and relevance of your answer. So by basically having a group of main points which are repeated and are done so in such a way that they're strengthened, that they're really strengthened, what you're doing is you're indicating that everything you're writing is purposeful, it's relevant, and you've already tested that it matches the question, because when you did your planning, or when you do your planning, you would have already tested that, yes, this matches the question. I know exactly what it is that I'm focusing on. Okay, so look at main points now. Okay, find some things which have a strong connection with the question, as I said. So really your question is your authority. You're trying to match that authority. You're trying to find things which are essentially going straight along the rails here and not diverting off. You're grouping them with any similar points. So as I mentioned before, that idea of grouping things if there are lots of small points that you have which are somewhat related to a bigger point. Once you have about 3, you disregard the rest. And as I said, you don't want to be filling your essay with unnecessary ideas or tangents which go off in different directions. So by picking things immediately to have a very strong connection with the question and really have relevance, and that they're grouped together in such a way that they're basically referring to your ideas over and over, and you're developing them in such a way which is strong, you're basically making sure that you don't have to go off in any tangents, that you don't have to necessarily find an idea which is going to fill in some time or space, and that you're going directly towards exactly having an airtight, cohesive, and fully rounded essay. Okay, final step, which is focus on finding some proof. Now, if you know what your argument's going to do, you need to find some evidence from either your stimulus text or your stimulus that you're basically basing your answer on, or research if you are looking at something outside, and this is something that goes beyond English mostly, to support your answer. Finding proof is essential. You need to be able to find evidence straight away. And if you can do this somewhat in your planning process, immediately you know that each of your main points are valid. Now, as I said before, you can find evidence as you go, provided, of course, you know your stimulus text quite well. Because the last thing you want to be doing is constructing an argument, getting up to the point of where you're trying to prove it, and you've got no proof for it, and that everything that you've come up with so far doesn't prove what you're saying is true. So it will allow you to change that idea if your evidence for it is quite weak and you don't really have something to support it all that well. So that's essentially why you do this in the planning process. And even if it's just so you have a rough idea of what evidence it is you're going to use to support what you're writing. Okay, so let's go through that process again. So first of all, you've understood the question. You know exactly what it is you're going to have to write about. You start to brainstorm some ideas. So you do so in such a way that you know exactly what it is you're going to be writing about. you discuss them and you work out how you're going to discuss them. So what it is I'm actually going to talk about in each of those main ideas, I will group them so I know exactly where my main points are and how I can discuss them and how I can build upon each one using that discussion process I just mentioned. And find evidence and then arrange them in order from the strongest point to the weakest point. And that's basically your planning process. Now, it should literally take you a little bit longer than how I just described it then. And that's literally because you'll know your text already, hopefully, and you would have read it, you understood it, and then you'll be able to immediately go, okay, it's got this, it's got this, it's got this, this matches the question, this matches the question, this matches the question. And then, finally, you'll be able to use some things, find some things that back it up. You're making sure you do some double, triple checks, make sure, okay, I'm definitely answering the question, and then that's when you can start writing, and you can feel free, as you're writing it, to go back to your plan as you look up the top of your page, wherever your plan is, and say, yep, I'm addressing the question with this discussion. And that's basically it for the planning process. So make sure you remember all those things. Have a very strong plan in mind. And that's the thing I tell all my students is if you are in doubt, always have a plan that you stick to and that you know like the back of your hand. Because your questions will change constantly, but if you have a similar process, it makes it much, much easier than when you're just trying to panic and come up with ideas. Because that's obviously it's not going to work, but it means it's just going to come up with all these different variables and ideas and tangents, and you're going to go off in different directions. It'll be a mess. If you have a very strict plan and a very strict process, then it's only going to take you a few minutes, and it means that your argument is far more streamlined than it otherwise would be. Otherwise, that's about it for planning. Until next time, see you later.